She always hated red pens, said they were passive-aggressive. That was the first laugh. Not a real one, just a short exhale through her nose when I told her I'd marked up her manuscript in crimson. "You're not grading me, Professor," she said, but her eyes danced a little too hard. I laughed too, but only out of form. You see, in our house, the punchlines always had blood under the fingernails. She'd taken to calling herself a writer lately, despite never having published anything on her own. I edited her first draft over Christmas while she channeled, in her yoga room with a mug of mushroom tea and a Himalayan lamp shaped like an owl. That manuscript was scattered, juvenile, heavy on adjectives and light on ideas. But I polished it for her, tightened the metaphors, rearranged chapters. It started looking like something halfway respectable. She smiled like I just handed her a finished jigsaw puzzle and she was going to tell everyone she did it solo. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was her sudden obsession with handwriting, mine, specifically. I've always kept a private notebook, small moleskins with black covers and tightly packed lines in Parker Quink blue ink. Quotes, musings, literary fragments that might someday live again in print. One day I came home and she had one open, sitting there with a glass of Syrah and a highlighter. She said she liked the way my mind curved between thoughts. That phrase stayed with me too polished for her. I started checking her Word docs. She'd copied entire phrases, ideas, even a specific story structure from my journal into her original novel. She had marked them with yellow highlight, like she was editing me. At first, I thought maybe it was admiration, maybe even collaboration, some subconscious absorption. Until I saw the email. It wasn't meant for me, it was on our shared desktop, left open in a minimized window. Her editor, a man 10 years younger than her with a shaved jawline and a smug little signature tag that read, Editor-in-Chief, under Current Books. The email was mostly banal, notes, timelines, flattery. But one line hooked me so hard I didn't breathe for 20 seconds. "If your husband ever finds out where this is really going, we'll be halfway through your second book by then." Where this is really going. That phrase isn't sexual in tone, not directly. It's strategic, premeditated. I scrolled back and saw more, dozens of exchanges, half of them clearly between lovers, the other half transactional. He was packaging her work into submissions under a house pseudonym, apparently a trick he'd done before with other hopefuls. I found a short story she'd written, largely cribbed from one of my workshop lectures, already published online under the name Jonas Finch. She hadn't told me. No gloating, no confetti, just a silent theft. And the man she was sleeping with was making a name for himself with words I wrote in the margins years ago. I didn't confront her. Not right away. I needed a deeper cut. So I traced Jonas Finch. 3 publications. 1 book contract pending. I pulled PDFs of all his work, ran a deep intertextual analysis, my specialty, ironically, and discovered a chunk of it bore eerie resemblance to a 1972 manuscript from a dead Cornell writer, long out of print, buried in academic archives. Nearly a full chapter lifted verbatim, sentence rhythm and all. I had proof. More than proof, I had motive, opportunity, and 1,000 silent witnesses in the form of dates, files, and drafts. Still, I said nothing. One evening, she told me she had something important and honest to share. I set my tea down and gave her the silence she wanted to fill. She said she was falling into a new version of herself, that her editor had seen her, that this had to happen for her to grow. She wanted my blessing. I said, of course. She looked confused for a second. No tears, no screaming, just a nod. And then she left. That was the last time she saw me as her husband. What she didn't know was that the editor received a neatly packaged dossier 2 weeks later from an anonymous academic authority highlighting a serious case of literary theft. Plagiarism, rediscovered and digitized. Enough to void his contracts and shutter the book. His publisher announced a formal review. Both projects were canceled. The real author's estate is now involved. She, meanwhile, has quietly published nothing since. I hear he's paranoid now, thinks everyone in the literary world is watching him, and she's stuck defending a man who's become unemployable in his own field. As for me, well, I'm working on a new manuscript. It's called When You're the Footnote. Not a memoir exactly. More of a lesson. A tribute to red pens, and the things they bleed out long before you ever see the stain. It started with a scent, the kind of thing you think you're imagining until it turns up again and again, quietly insisting on being noticed. Her shampoo had changed. For years it was that lavender vanilla blend she always said made her feel centered. Then, One morning, she passed by me in the kitchen and I caught something sharper, muskier, the kind of scent that doesn't belong to a woman in her 50s who drinks fennel tea and puts crystals under her pillow. It was faint, but present. I asked if she'd changed brands. She said no, same as always, and walked out with that half-smile she wears when she lies about little things. That same week, she started waking up earlier than me. She's never been a morning person, not even close. I'd be pouring my first coffee and hear her already in the yoga room, the floor creaking, her voice low on a call she'd always hang up as soon as I came close. Just mindfulness podcasts, she said when I asked. They helped me align. Align with what? She never said. Then I noticed she'd changed the passcode on her phone. Not once in 15 years had she done that. It used to be her birthday. Now it was a 6-digit string she typed fast, muscle memory. She caught me glancing one day and said, "You don't have to look. I'm not hiding anything." The next day, the phone was always face down. At dinner, during TV, even charging on the nightstand. I tested her once. I picked it up under the pretense of checking the weather. It was dead. "Oh," she said, "battery drains fast lately." But I had seen her plug it in not 10 minutes earlier. It wasn't dead. It was off. A week later, I found a card in the trash. Not in the kitchen bin where she normally tosses junk, but in the bin under her vanity, buried beneath cotton pads and Q-tips. A small, square envelope from a local boutique press. I fished it out, careful not to crumple it, and read the handwritten note. "You're the voice I've waited for. Let's make something lasting." Signed with just a letter J. No date. No return address. Just a whisper on thick paper. That night, she asked if I could cook, said she was too creatively wrung out. As she said it, she scrolled on her phone with a smirk that wasn't meant for me. I made the salmon while she pretended to browse recipes. That's when I checked our joint calendar, the one we used to coordinate events. Empty. Not just blank, but scrubbed. She deleted months of shared entries, dentist appointments, dinner reservations, even our anniversary. When I asked, she shrugged. "I'm simplifying," she said. "Too much clutter." I nodded, said nothing. But I began saving backups. I set up a local cache, mirrored her cloud data into a private drive. Every change, every deletion, every note she made in that writing app she thought I didn't know about, I captured it. Not because I was trying to trap her. I already knew. But because knowing wasn't enough. I wanted the shape of it. I wanted to understand the architecture of her betrayal. That's when I found the drafts. She thought she was being clever. She named the files after vegetables, zucchini.docs, kaledraft3.docs, like it was some cute trick for cataloging recipes. But inside were chapters. Whole scenes, long paragraphs of dialogue that didn't sound like her at all. Tighter, cleaner, with more rhythm than she could manage on her own. I recognized phrases. Not just mine, phrases I'd written in reviews, lectures, essays. Woven in like borrowed lace. And next to some of them were notes. Short, typed in red. "Sharpen this. Think Conrad. Use his anecdote from August lecture here." His, not hers. She wasn't writing alone. I ran a text comparison tool. The pattern was clear. Entire passages matched a blog I found under the name Jonas Finch, posted anonymously on a site affiliated with a mid-tier indie publisher. The style was distinctive. Worse, the signature in the About page matched a detail I hadn't noticed before, same initial, J. I kept digging. Poise records. DNS trails. A pseudonym page linked to a professional editor's portfolio, clean, smug, too curated. A man who positioned himself as the discoverer of hidden female voices. The same man I now suspected was ghostwriting parts of my wife's novel while sleeping with her. Or maybe he thought she was ghostwriting his. Either way, the words weren't hers. The voice I loved was gone, overwritten by something else. Something practiced, polished, manufactured in tandem with another man. That was when the dread crystallized, not just that she was unfaithful, but that she was being used. Or worse, that she wanted to be used. To shed her skin entirely. And she thought I wouldn't notice. Thought I was too old, too gentle, too stuck in my own routines to spot the decay under her so-called renaissance. But I wasn't stuck. I was recording, cataloging, preparing. Not for a confrontation. No, those are for people who want closure. I didn't want closure. I wanted clarity. I wanted to see how far she'd fall once the scaffolding was pulled, once the man she'd pinned her voice to was exposed for the fraud he truly was. Because this wasn't just infidelity. This was erasure. And I was going to make sure they both remembered every word I never said. It was the post-it note that did it, just a yellow square, slapped onto the corner of the fridge with lazy handwriting that didn't belong in this house. Get wine, hugs and kisses, Jay. She had never once in our 30 years left me a note that ended in anything remotely affectionate, let alone playful. The J wasn't even for me. I stood there staring at it while the kettle screamed behind me, boiling itself dry. I peeled the note off slowly, folded it once, twice, 3 times until it disappeared between my fingers. That morning, I'd watched her walk into her writing room with a bounce in her step, humming some ambient tune I knew she didn't even like. She didn't notice me. I was glued to her phone. I knew the cadence of her texts now, the way her face softened when it was him. That note was confirmation, but it wasn't what broke me. What broke me came 20 minutes later, when I opened her manuscript folder and saw the latest version titled, Final Draft _approved _JF. Approved. As if she needed his blessing more than mine. As if he were the editor of her soul. I sat down at my desk and stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in silence. Then I opened every single one of her drafts and began deleting them. Not dragging to the trash, deleting. Permanently. One by one. Years of files. Hundreds of hours of my editing, her revisions, his annotations. Gone. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I worked methodically. Then I opened the folder where I kept all my private writing. My own essays, articles, lectures. Everything I'd found cross-referenced in her work. I printed them. One by one. 63 pages in total. I bound them with a paperclip, walked into her writing room without knocking, and placed the bundle on her desk. She looked up, startled, mouth half open like she was about to say something. This, I said, is what you stole. Her face flushed instantly, the kind of red that has nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with exposure. What are you talking about? She said, as darting toward the laptop. I picked it up, held it above my head, and dropped it, straight down, screen first, hard. The crunch echoed through the room like a bone snapping. She gasped and lunged for it, but I stepped back. You don't get to use my words anymore, I said. Not to seduce him. Not to sell yourself. Not to become someone else on paper. She tried to reach for the printed pages, but I slapped my hand down on them. This isn't a collaboration, I said. This was a robbery. Her voice cracked. I thought you wanted to help me grow. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. You weren't growing. You were harvesting. Taking what I built, cutting it down, and feeding it to a man who couldn't write a grocery list without spell check. She tried to cry, but it was dry performative. I stepped around her, opened her closet, and pulled out the drawer where she kept her inspiration objects, little trinkets she said connected her to characters. The feather. The clay bowl. The perfume bottle I gave her on our 15th anniversary. I took them all to the bathroom and tossed them into the tub. Then I poured rubbing alcohol over them. She followed me, still babbling, pleading for me to talk like an adult. I lit a match. Just one. Dropped it in. The bowl cracked with a loud pop. The perfume hissed. The feather curled into black. She screamed, not at the fire, but at the loss. That was when I saw the truth in her face. She didn't love me. She loved the version of herself I'd helped her construct. And now that version was burning. You have until tonight, I said, to be out. She sputtered, where am I supposed to go? I didn't answer. I didn't care. I walked to the fridge, opened a bottle of her favorite wine, poured it down the sink, and left the bottle next to the note she'd received from him. Then I opened my laptop and typed up a resignation email to the small publisher where I'd helped mentor up-and-coming authors, his publisher. I attached an anonymous report with side-by-side comparisons between his published short story and the out-of-print Cornell manuscript he'd copied. I hit send. Then I made dinner. Quietly. Without music. She didn't come out of the room. I set a single place at the table. Just mine. Lit a candle. Ate in silence. I'd erupted. Yes, but not in the way she expected. I didn't throw plates. I didn't punch walls. I destroyed what mattered most to her. The illusion that she was creating anything original. The illusion that she was safe under my roof. The illusion that I'd ever forgive her. And she knew it. The smoke from the bathroom had faded, but the air still stank of lost dreams. She sat in the writing room all night, curled up in a chair like a child who just learned Santa wasn't real. And me? I slept like a man who just cleaned house. The strangest thing wasn't that she was leaving, it was how easily she let go of the history. There was no clinging, no attempts at real reconciliation, not even a proper goodbye to the life we built. She packed her things like someone closing a hotel room after a forgettable stay, folding sweaters she hadn't worn in years and tossing them into boxes without a second glance. Watching her, I began to see the full outline of what she really was, not just a cheater, not even a thief of words, but a collector. She didn't love people. She collected versions of herself she could wear in front of them. With me, she was the quiet muse, the literary wife with a teacup and a journal. With him, she was the bold, emerging voice with stories worth stealing. And when I finally started playing back the pieces, it all snapped into place. The way she used to quote me in conversations like it was something she had just read. The way her compliments always repeated, never evolved. You make everything feel stable, she'd say, like I was a weighted blanket, not a man. The night she made love like she was acting out a scene she'd already written. I remembered the voicemail I saved from our anniversary 2 years ago, her voice slow, soft, rehearsed. I played it again and realized it was identical in tone to the recording she used to submit her audiobook excerpt. Word for word, breath for breath. None of it had ever been real. She had always been narrating, even in private moments, writing over our life in her head before it was even done happening. And I'd been a character in her internal monologue, the patient husband, the safe harbor. She didn't love me. She loved the version of herself she could be around me, until she found a version she liked better. That's when the shift happened. I stopped feeling betrayed. I stopped wanting her to hurt like I hurt. I wanted something else now, clarity, control, a clean strike across the fantasy she'd built. Because that's what this was, a fantasy. She wasn't a writer. She was a projectionist, showing a reel of borrowed thoughts, secondhand feelings, and stolen structure. Her affair partner, Jay, he wasn't an exception. He was just another mirror, another prop. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was how much of what she fed him came from me. From the essays I wrote, the lectures I gave, the private fragments I jotted into notebooks over decades. I was the architect. He was living in a house I built and thinking it was hers. That made him more than a homewrecker. He was a squatter. A fraud, standing in my shoes while pretending they were custom. That's when I began to map out the retaliation. Not rage. Not vengeance. Just restoration of authorship. If she could erase me from her narrative, I would erase her from mine and his. Quietly. Irrevocably. I had already sent the plagiarism report to the publisher, but that was only the opening salvo. I still had all the drafts. All the backups. Side by side showing my original notes against his edited versions. I had lecture slides from years back where lines now appeared in his published work. And I had a favor to call in, an old colleague at a literary ethics journal who once said, "If you ever find a smoking gun, bring it to me warm." But I didn't just want the editor to fall. I wanted her to be stuck with the fallout. I wanted her to have to choose, defend the man she risked everything for, or admit she was complicit in his fraud. That was the psychological trap. She thought she'd finally stepped into the life she deserved, with a man who understood her voice. She didn't see the quicksand beneath their story. Because once the scandal broke, and publishers would blackball him. But they wouldn't touch her either. Not if she was tied to it. Not if the manuscript that got her noticed was the fruit of a poison tree. She would be unpublishable, irredeemable, and I wouldn't have to say a word. I'd already withdrawn from our mutual contacts quietly. Let her explain why I disappeared. Let her try to resurrect a solo career without the stolen phrases she can't reconstruct. Let her stare at a blank screen, wondering why the words no longer flow, why the voice she thought was hers has gone silent. Because it never belonged to her. It belonged to me. She just read the part. And now the script is gone. That was the shift, not revenge, not hatred, just clarity. This wasn't about making her suffer. It was about reclaiming what she tried to rewrite. About reminding her, and him, that some men don't break. Some men edit. Quietly. Ruthlessly. And when they're done, there's nothing left but footnotes and ashes. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, phone in hand, texting with her usual slack-jawed half-smile, this performance she thought she was getting away with. I didn't wait. I said, "Tell me something. Do you ever actually write anything yourself, or is it all just theft and pillow talk?" Her fingers froze mid-text, eyes still locked on the screen like maybe the message would protect her. She looked up, smile twitching, trying to gauge how much I knew. "What are you talking about?" she said, voice trembling just enough to sound innocent, not guilty. No, don't do that," I snapped. "Don't pretend you're confused. You're not confused, you're just scrambling to figure out what I know. So let me help you. I know everything." I walked over and dropped a folder onto the counter. Printouts, side-by-side comparisons, timestamps, even a few highlighted passages from my old notebooks now published under someone else's name. Her face drained the color right out of the room. "You've been screwing a ghost," I said, calm but razor sharp. You think he's your salvation, your editor, your muse, but he's just a con man who built his career on plagiarized corpses. And you handed him the shovel. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. No, don't speak. Just listen. I want you to hear exactly how pathetic this sounds. You took my words, my lectures, my metaphors, my phrasing, and you let that fraud polish them into something marketable. And now you're standing there pretending this is a misunderstanding. She looked down, then back up, blinking fast. I didn't mean, yes, you did, I said, stepping closer. You meant every syllable. Every smirk when he texted you. Every lie you rehearsed in the mirror. Every creative session you pretended was solo. You let him use me. Through you. You sat there and watched him take credit for my language like it was some kind of romantic gesture. Her lip quivered. I was just trying to what? I snapped. Find your voice? You had it. You had it when I edited your first story, when I sat across from you at midnight helping you cut through the fog. But that wasn't good enough, was it? You needed more sparkle, more ego, more drama. So you traded in the truth for fantasy. You sold your dignity for a few flirty comments and a bootleg book deal. She stepped back, bumping into the table, and whispered, "It wasn't like that." I laughed. Not kindly. Don't lie now. Don't insult both of us. You want to hear what it was like? He calls you a hollow delivery system. That's in one of his emails. Said you channel well, like you're a damn tape recorder. You thought he admired your work? He admired how easily you carried someone else's. Her hand went to her mouth, but I wasn't finished. I leaned in, close enough that she couldn't pretend she didn't hear. He didn't fall in love with your writing. He fell in love with mine. You're just the envelope he licked to send it off. She sat down hard, like her knees gave out. I didn't know, she whispered. Didn't know what? That you were betraying the one person who ever actually believed in your voice? That you were stealing? Or that you were being used by a man who only knows how to manipulate mediocre women into mimicking something smarter? Her tears finally came, but they didn't move me. Save them, I said. Save them for the day the publisher calls to retract the offer. Save them for when he stops answering your texts because he's too busy trying to scrub his name off the internet. Save them for when you realize you threw away a man who never cheated, never lied, and would have gone to war for your name. But you never even knew how to say sorry, did you? She reached out, as if I might still soften. I stepped back. I'm not angry you cheated, I said. I'm angry I wasted my loyalty. I poured everything into you, every tool, every truth, every moment. And you turned around and used it to build a shrine to a snake. She tried to say something, anything, but I was done. I hope he was worth it, I said, walking away. Because the next time you try to write something worth reading, you'll be doing it in silence. Without me. Without him. Without a single stolen line to save you. And then I walked out, not because I was finished, but because the real punishment had only just begun. She came into the study an hour after the confrontation, barefoot, face blotchy, hair falling from its careful twist, trying to look fragile the way an actress tries to look real. She stood there for a moment, waiting for me to acknowledge her. I didn't. I kept reading, one of the very essays she'd repackaged through him. I could hear her breathing change. The performance was cracking before she even began. I wasn't thinking clearly, she said, voice wet and low. I turned a page. I was overwhelmed. I was trying to feel alive again. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I looked up slowly, held her gaze just long enough to make her squirm, and said, but you knew how to talk to him. She stepped closer. It wasn't just about him. It wasn't even about the writing. She was crying now, reaching for emotion like it was an excuse. I was lost. I didn't think you saw me anymore. You always had your world, your intellect, your words. I just wanted to matter again. I closed the folder and leaned back. So you mattered by stealing, by lying, by copying and pasting your way into someone else's skin. Her voice rose, desperate now. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought maybe if I could just get one thing published, you'd be proud of me again. I thought maybe I could finally be something on my own. I tilted my head. On your own. Using my phrases. His help. My structure. And now my forgiveness, too. Her hands clenched at her sides. I didn't ask for your forgiveness. No. I cut in. You assumed it. Like you assumed my silence was consent. Like you assumed I was too kind, too soft, too wrapped in my books to see what you were becoming. She came closer, dropped to her knees in front of me like some twisted cliché. I can fix this. I'll tell the publisher it was him. I'll say he pressured me. I'll say I was manipulated. Just don't throw us away. Her tears hit my shoes. I didn't move. You threw us away, I said. Page by page. Moan by moan. And now you want to rewrite the ending like it's just another draft. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. You don't get edits anymore. That broke something in her. She started shaking, not from sadness, but panic. Real panic. The kind that sets in when the performance fails and the audience starts walking out. You can't do this, she said. You can't just erase me. I'm your wife. I stood up. You were. Now you're just a case study. Please, she begged, crawling after me as I walked toward the door. Please don't ruin my life. I turned back. I'm not ruining it. I'm returning it. To its original author. She screamed then. Something primal. Not dignified. Not poetic. Just raw, terrified noise. I watched her collapse onto the floor, shoulders heaving, hair stuck to her cheeks like seaweed on driftwood. She vomited into her own lap. I didn't flinch. I stepped past her, grabbed a towel from the hallway cabinet, and laid it on the floor next to her. You'll want this, I said, flat and unfeeling. She looked up, sobbing, mascara streaked like claw marks. How can you be so cold? I smiled without warmth. Because you taught me how. She crawled forward again, tried to grab my leg, clinging like a child caught lying about something bigger than she could understand. I'll go public, she whispered. I'll tell the truth. I'll take the blame. I nodded. You will. Soon. Because when they call, and they will, you'll have to choose. Protect him, or save yourself. And either way, your story ends the same. Alone. She sat there, shaking, soaked, humiliated, and I watched the realization bloom behind her eyes. Not just that she'd lost me, but that she'd lost everything she borrowed to feel important. Her fake career, her fake mentor, her fake voice, all turned to ash. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Cold. Clean. Exact. Her desperation meant nothing now. It was just noise. Background. A footnote. And when I walked out, I didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to see. By the time she stopped crying and started sleeping in the guest room, I'd already set the whole thing in motion. The trap wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no spectacle, just quiet, irreversible clicks of doors closing behind her. The first piece was legal. I drafted a series of innocuous documents weeks earlier, back when she still believed we might rebuild. One of them was labeled Vacation Property Joint Agreement. She skimmed it with tired eyes and signed without reading. What she actually signed was a transfer of rights. Her claim to our savings, to the rights of shared intellectual property, and, more importantly, to the book proposal she submitted under his coaching. I tied her name directly to it, legally, with dates, drafts, and signature trails, which meant that when the plagiarism was exposed, it would not be just his name in the gutter. It would be hers. The second move was technical. She still hadn't changed the passwords on her old cloud storage. She assumed I'd be too noble to look. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the last month mirroring her account into a locked archive. Emails, texts, early drafts, recorded voice notes. All of it, dated and preserved, even the deleted fragments. I kept a record of every time she sent one of my phrases to him. Every time he replied with "This is genius." I had clips of her saying things like "He'll never find out," and "Just tweak what he wrote, he won't notice." I organized them into a clean dossier with an index. 29 items, cross-referenced with timestamps and publication records. The kind of document you don't defend against, you just fold. The third piece was even easier. I reached out to a former colleague, now head of editorial ethics for a mid-tier publisher, and posed a hypothetical. What if an editor used ghostwritten material based on plagiarized lectures from an academic? The reaction was immediate. Legal liability, loss of professional standing, immediate termination. I didn't name names, not yet. Just let the idea spread like a shadow in the water. Then I uploaded the cleaned version of my report anonymously to 2 industry tip lines. One for plagiarism tracking, one for literary fraud. I gave it a week. During that time, I created a decoy, a fake manuscript titled Beneath the Lines, composed entirely of the stolen material she and he had claimed to co-develop. I seeded it into a private author group I knew he monitored, under a fake name, with a fake submission timestamp. And sure enough, it caught his eye. He messaged the fake account. I think we've crossed wires. This story's already in production. His panic was a scent I could smell through the screen. I watched as his online presence dimmed, tweets deleted, profile bio stripped, LinkedIn activity vanished. She hadn't noticed yet. She was too busy drafting a public post about resilience and starting over, tagging vague accounts that shared inspirational nonsense. I watched her schedule a meeting with a book coach. I saw her email her editor, him, asking for an update on the timeline. She wrote, "I'm feeling ready to go public soon." I smiled when I read it. I replied to that email myself, using his address. A small trick. She had given me access months ago when she wanted help formatting his emails. All it took was one cache login. I wrote, "Wait before you post anything. There's an issue I need to clear up." That bought me 3 more days. Just enough to finalize the final detail. A forwarded package sent to his publisher, this time directly from my name, with a single, ice-cold cover letter. The attached document outlines multiple instances of literary fraud involving your staff editor and a recent client. I've included proof of authorship and plagiarism. I am not interested in litigation. I only want the record corrected. Then I signed it. Real name, real title, real credentials. I sent a second package to her new book coach with the same materials, restructured for clarity, relabeled. Before you invest in this client, consider the origin of her voice. And finally, the third package went to her, printed, bound, hand-delivered to the guest room with a note on top. The note said, "You said you wanted to be heard. Congratulations. Now the whole industry is listening." I left it on her pillow. She didn't come out that night, but I didn't need to see her face. I'd already seen her future, and it was silent. She woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the warm hush of a morning untouched. This was a sterile, clinical silence, the kind that only follows a detonation. Her phone wasn't buzzing. No unread emails, no texts, not even spam. For someone who lived online, who fed off attention like oxygen, the absence was louder than any alert. She opened Instagram and saw it immediately. 2,000 followers gone overnight. The last post, a filtered selfie with a quote about turning pain into power, was riddled with comments she couldn't delete fast enough. Plagiarist. Fake. This you. Attached were screenshots. Her so-called novel juxtaposed line for line with archived lectures bearing my name. Her name was trending on a local writers' forum, but not the way she imagined. The thread title was "Another One Bites the Dust." Emerging author stole from retired professor. There were links, dates, proof. By 10 a.m., she had already received 3, "We regret to inform you," emails from indie publications that had previously praised her voice. One used the phrase, "irreparable breach of trust." Another copied the language I'd used in my letter to the publisher, correcting the record. She tried to call him, her editor, her affair partner, her escape route. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Nothing. Then she opened her inbox and found the automated reply. "Jonas Finch is no longer affiliated with Undercurrent Books. All inquiries should be directed to legal@undercurrentbooks.com." That's when the real panic set in. She called me. Of course she did. 7 missed calls before noon. I didn't pick up. She left voicemails. The tone shifted from urgent to pleading to hostile. The last one was just silence and breathing. I kept each one. At 1 p.m., she showed up at her parents' house, or tried to. They didn't answer. She banged on the door. The neighbor watched her from behind a curtain. She texted her mother. No reply. She sent the screenshots I had given them days earlier. Still nothing. By 3 p.m., she went to the co-working space she used for writing, or at least to be seen pretending to. Her access card didn't work. Inside, someone else was already at her desk. She asked to speak to the manager. They said her membership had been terminated due to public reputational risk. She was asked to leave. She didn't. Security helped her out. She wandered downtown in the rain, hoping for some place to feel familiar. She texted friends. 4 of them left her on read. One replied with a single word, "Wow." That night, she tried to log into her cloud archive, the one where she stored all her writing, including a backup of my notes, drafts, and revisions she claimed as her own. Access denied. She reset the password. Nothing. A new message popped up. This account has been suspended due to verified intellectual property violations. I had already handled that part. Quietly. Legally. No breach. Just reclamation. The next morning, her bank called. Not to freeze her account, but to notify her that the joint account had been restructured, entirely in my name. The document she signed under the guise of a vacation property adjustment had passed through without question. She had legally forfeited claim. She had $23 in her personal checking. By noon, her book coach had emailed to say, "Given recent developments and legal concerns, I'm no longer able to represent your work." By 5 p.m., she was back at the house, or rather, what used to be the house. Her key didn't fit. She rang the doorbell. I answered. Didn't open the door. Just looked at her through the glass. She was soaked, eyes red, shaking. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. I said nothing. She pressed her hand to the glass. "Please." I didn't know it would go this far. I leaned in. It hasn't gone far enough. Then I closed the curtain. Left her there in the storm, a ghost-denied entry to the life she burned. Hours later, I watched from upstairs as a rideshare picked her up. She left behind everything, her name, her voice, her future. And the worst part for her wasn't the fallout. It was that no one was fighting to stop it. No one was defending her. Because when the story finally broke, the industry didn't argue. They nodded. Quietly. She wasn't the first. Just the latest. Another hollow echo who thought style was enough to mask theft. But now her echo had gone silent. And the world was done listening. The final blow was delivered not with shouting or spectacle, but with a curated calm, a surgical act designed to strip away the last fibers of her identity. It began with a package, hand-delivered not to her, but to someone she never expected. Her late mentor's widow, a woman she used to call the reason I became a writer, who once wrote her a glowing recommendation to a residency she never deserved. Inside the envelope was a letter, written by me, paired with 2 marked-up manuscripts. One, the original work of her mentor, a 1993 novella long out of circulation but still preserved in university archives. The second, a section from the story she had tried to sell under her name, the same prose lifted word for word, paragraph by paragraph, with a few minor swaps in gender and time period. The widow didn't say anything publicly. She didn't need to. She simply sent a reply. "Thank you for preserving what mattered." And then, without warning, her literary circles began to shut their doors. Not with anger, but with quiet dignity. Her name was quietly removed from group directories. She was uninvited from a panel 2 weeks out. A friend she once bragged about having in New York blocked her on every platform. Her inbox filled with silence. But I wasn't done. The final act had to be personal. Precise. So I took the one thing she still hadn't lost, her precious writing group's annual anthology. She'd submitted early, before everything unraveled, a piece she titled Ashes of a Marriage, supposedly fiction, written from the perspective of a misunderstood wife. It was trite, unoriginal, but it passed through to the editor's desk. I, on the other hand, submitted anonymously. A short piece titled Footnote. In it, I detailed the anatomy of betrayal, the theft of language, the layering of lies, the fantasy of originality, all told in second person. The you was unmistakably her. The editor, who happened to be a former student of mine, accepted both pieces. When the anthology was printed, they were placed back to back. Page 46, Ashes of a Marriage. Page 51, Footnote. The juxtaposition did the work. Readers knew. She received the first email 24 hours after publication, then 10 more. "Did you know he wrote this about you? This is devastating. How do you come back from that?" She tried to respond, tried to claim coincidence, say it wasn't about her. But the receipts were already circling. Her phrases, her stolen lines, her tone. I'd written her into a corner so tight she couldn't wiggle free. And the final, coldest twist? I donated her final royalty check, the tiny earnings from her last ghostwritten success, to the very creative writing program she never got into. In her name. With a note attached, in honor of those who never needed to steal to be seen. She found out via email. Tried to revoke it. She couldn't. The paperwork was sealed. The announcement had already been posted online. Her name, now publicly tied to a legacy she didn't earn, didn't control, and couldn't take back. And I never raised my voice. Never touched a thing. I just removed the scaffolding and let gravity do what it always does. She tried to run. Tried to rebrand. Deleted her socials. Moved to a new city. Tried to relaunch under a new pen name. But her voice was gone. You can't fake what was never yours. Every phrase she tried to write rang hollow. Every attempt to rebuild was followed by shadows. Whispers. Quiet refusals. She wasn't infamous. just erased. A cautionary tale told in polite tones by people who'd once pretended to admire her. Meanwhile, I published When You're the Footnote. Not under a pseudonym. Not hidden. Clean. Controlled. Every word mine. Critics called it elegant, venom and velvet. I did no interviews. I didn't need to. The words spoke for themselves. And in every copy, buried in the acknowledgments, was a single line. For the one who confused a mirror for a pen. That was the end. Not loud. Not violent. Just final. She had feared obscurity more than punishment. So I gave it to her. Completely. I didn't get the house back. I didn't want it. I sold it, quietly, to a young couple just starting out, the kind who still believe in words like forever. I left behind nothing but one book on the shelf, my own, and a note taped inside the cover. Know what you're building. Know who you're building it with. I've since moved into a smaller place. Fewer rooms, no shadows. I write again. Not for her. Not to prove anything. Just because it's what I do. My name's clean. My work stands on its own. And her? Last I heard, she's doing freelance editing under a false name, trying to help others find their voice. That's the punchline, I suppose. She never had one. Just echoes of better men. I sometimes wonder if she still reads my work. If she flips through the pages of When You're the Footnote and tries to tell herself it's not about her. That would be fitting. Her final performance, denial with a straight face. She thought this would be a war. She thought there'd be a fight, tears, some kind of dramatic explosion. She never understood who I really was. I don't throw punches. I draw maps. I don't shout. I document. I don't need to watch someone fall apart to know they're broken. You just pull the right thread and step back. That's all it takes. And make no mistake, she didn't just cheat on a husband. She cheated on a mind. She thought betrayal was private, intimate, forgivable. But she betrayed thought itself. She desecrated trust with a keyboard and a fake signature. And when the weight of that came back on her, not from me, but from everyone else, she couldn't even explain it. Because there was no truth to lean on. No core. Just borrowed parts collapsing under scrutiny. I didn't do this out of bitterness. Bitterness is for amateurs. I did it for correction. For justice, not in the legal sense, but in the intellectual one. I took back what was stolen. I made sure the world knew the difference between real and replica. Between authorship and impersonation. Between a writer and a mimic. Some people still ask if I regret it. If I feel bad for how completely I erased her. And I asked them one thing. If someone tried to replace your legacy with their costume version of it, would you let them? She didn't just betray me. She tried to stand on my shoulders and call it a stage. So I did what had to be done. With precision. With silence. With truth. I'm not looking for applause. I'm not trying to inspire. I'm just telling you what happened. So when someone lies to your face and steals behind your back, remember this. You don't need to raise your voice to destroy them. You just have to be the one who finishes the story. I didn't win her back. I didn't even want her gone. What I wanted, and what I took, was authorship. Of my life. Of the truth. Of the ending. And if you're still wondering whether I went too far, ask yourself this. How many lines of your life would you let someone else rewrite before you picked up the pen?